Welcome to the next edition of the MahaBarsha show. Today we have a very, very interesting guest on the show, Emily. Emily introduces herself as a public speaking coach. Now, she's going to tell us a little bit today about what that means and why she's on the show and why Barsha and I thought that'd be great to have Emily on the show. But there's a real story behind how we both came to meet Emily. So, Barsha, do you want to tell us a little bit about how we met Emily?
Absolutely. Thank you, Maha, and welcome, Emily.
Thank
Before
you.
you get to say hello, um, uh, so Maha, I was in an organization where we worked in the same reporting line. Um, you and I have a common connection, Ross Rotherham.
Yes.
In fact, he was one of my first managers in cybersecurity, and so he has gone on and started his um, own sort of business exec coaching sort of thing. And so we catch up still. He's in Sydney. We catch up still once in a while. We'll connect, and we caught up for lunch. And one day, just and he was like, "Hey, I think you should meet someone, Basha. Emily, you should meet Emily." And I said, "Really? Tell me." And he goes, "Oh, she does this amazing thing. She actually prepares women to go and run, like, keynote sessions." I'm like, "Wow, really?" Like, I didn't even think somebody had that kind of job,
Mm-hmm.
whereas me on the other end going, I wish I could do, keynote speaking. But
Mm-hmm.
it was just like that, and it intrigued me. He sent us an intro note, and we connected, Emily, and just listening to you for that, we probably just spoke for 15-20 minutes the
Yeah.
first time. It was just inspirational, and you said yes to coming to MahaBarsha. So here we are. um, yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Say hello to the audience, and thank you for coming to the show.
Oh, no, thank you, ladies. It's so good to have a chat with you this morning. So, yeah, I am a public speaking and storytelling coach, but my role wasn't always like that. I spent about a decade in the cybersecurity industry, and I loved what I did in the cybersecurity industry, but I was a really shy person and I really didn't like presenting.
Oh
And
no, you are not.
I was, I was. And when I would present, it was terrible. And I went through my own journey and went through things like Toastmasters and learnt the art of storytelling. And as I found out things like storytelling and I felt like, oh, that helped me to get up and speak to people, I really love helping people. And so I started sharing what I do. And it
Mm.
started by lunch and learn brown bag sessions,
Hmm.
and I would do one, and then someone else would ask me, oh, can you come and speak to our execs? And I'd say, okay, sure. And then from that, I got sent to China to run storytelling sessions for our tech area in China. And I got sent to India. And as that was all happening, I was thinking, I'm getting so much joy from doing what I'm doing, and I'm not getting paid a thing. And so I realized that that was where my passion was lying. And so a fateful thing happened at work where we went through a big restructure, and I was given the opportunity to take a package. And I started my business 5 years ago. And one of the first things that I did out of there was to help people, first time speakers, to speak at a cybersecurity conference. And it was amazing. And then I went on to do things like helping women speak on stage. And a large proportion of what I do is teaching people the art of storytelling. And for me, storytelling is such an incredible thing because if you're communicating to someone, you want to
Mm.
be relatable, you want to be memorable, and you want to be persuasive, right? No matter what type of conversation that you're having with someone. And stories win over facts and figures in all of those regards. And so if you communicate, and I mean, don't we all, right? Every single day,
Mhm.
wouldn't you want to learn something that is a superpower and that is more relatable, more memorable, more persuasive than facts and figures? So when I caught on to this and I realized how amazing storytelling was, I wanted to dive deep into it, and that's why I love it so much.
That's really awesome. Hearing you talk about that three things like relatable, memorable, and persuasive. And as we kicked off the call, we were talking about this. Like, oh, we still remember stories we heard as children. And I know that that's not the kind of stories you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the concept of having something that you can relate to, memorable and persuasive, that lets you actually be like, okay, now I'm going to go to sleep because I don't want that thing coming up to me or the monster under the bed, all kinds of things were just like great ways in which the stories, it just in a general, the art of storytelling has always been around from ancient times.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
recently,
I mean,
good.
PowerPoint didn't exist back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And so of course, when we were speaking to our children, and everyone tells stories every day. That's the other
Mhm.
thing to get out of the bag. A lot of people will say, I'm not a natural storyteller. And in fact, everybody is. So if you're speaking to your friends and you're telling them about something that's recently happened, you're going to be telling a story and you're going to be sharing all those ingredients. And they're going to be wanting to know, oh, and then what happened?
Mhm.
Right? It's
Yeah.
just when we get into the corporate world, we throw all that out the window and we
Yeah.
start speaking in corporate speak and we
Mhm.
pull out our PowerPoint slides and we do death by PowerPoint. And it really goes against everything that storytelling is.
Mhm.
So our preferred method of communicating, whether we're a child, whether we're an old person, whether we're young, no matter what it is hearing a story. It's easier to listen to, it's easier to remember, and there is that factor of you want to keep listening because you want to find out, well, what actually happens. However, I think the biggest misconception about storytelling that I've at least come across in the clients that I teach is that it needs to be this massive thing. So, yes, a story can be full of rich detail and it can have lots of descriptive language and it can be something that you might see on a TED stage, as an example, but it doesn't have to be that full on and it doesn't have to take that long to prepare. So, I was having a conversation with a client the other day, prepping him for an interview, and I told him that we should try and find a story for him to tell when he's talking about why he wants the role. And he said to me, but isn't it risky? And might I go off on a tangent if I tell a story? And I said, well, yes, but we're going to do more of a micro storytelling. So you don't have to prep this long winded thing that goes for 5 minutes and has descriptive language and all of that. We just want to give people a
Mhm.
taste of something. So I think I was telling you ladies the other day about my analogy, and I think it probably makes sense to clarify that here as well for people. So to me, information's a little bit like fast food. You will go to it. It's really easy and simple, just like you would go and get fast food. It's cheap, but it doesn't have a great outcome. So fast food doesn't make you feel good. It's not nutritious. On the other hand of the scale is what I was talking about before. It's the TED Talk storytelling. It's like a fine dining experience. You would probably take someone out to a fancy restaurant if it's their birthday or it's an anniversary or something like that. It's expensive, but if you really want to bring out the big guns, that's where you'd go. That's what an amazing story is a bit like. To me,
Mm.
what's far more useful and the everyday storytelling is a little bit like a home cooked meal. It's a lot easier to do a home cooked meal than go out to fine dining. It's a bit more effort than sharing information, but it's far more nutritious than it is going to fast food. So that in between storytelling is it's easy to prepare. You can almost do it off the cuff, and it's going to get you a far better outcome because it is more relatable, more memorable, and more persuasive than information is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's such a fantastic analogy, right? And it's relatable as to the theme, right? It's relatable, it's
Mhm.
memorable, and it's persuasive as well. But
Yeah.
just taking a step back, Emily, just and you covered it really quickly.
Mm.
We're all in cybersecurity, right? And you talked about you being in cybersecurity and doing an awesome job at it, where you were
Mm.
sent to different overseas to actually where you could explore what interested you outside of your day job, which
Yeah.
is so fantastic, right? Just even unpacking that. And
Mm.
just, I think a lot of people who are technical or trying to get to technical think, I gotta be good at this. And this
Mm.
is my field of expertise and I get judged for it. I need to prove. But I think just that journey, like in the next, the couple of minutes you took,
Yeah.
that there was a lot of like you were good at that, but then you explored and you were kind of going, this is interesting to me. And you know, you got sent to China and India, the cultural sort of thing. So for anybody
Yeah.
listening to this, right, I think it's such a fantastic thing to not pigeonhole yourself into just the
Mm.
job that you're doing, because you never know, you know, like if you had said, I don't have time for this, I'm interested
Yeah.
in this, I don't
Yeah.
have time for this wouldn't have eventuated, you know, like you
Exactly.
now you have your own business and
Yeah.
you're running it with a sort of a work-life balance with two kids and all of that, right? So
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to go to
Oh,
that. And
100%. Yeah.
right.
And I think a lot of people talk to me about what I've done and they're really interested in my transition, and they want to know how could they do something similar as well. And I always say, just follow your passion. It's not like I decided I wanted to be a public speaking and storytelling coach, so I then left my job and actually made that happen. I followed my
Mm.
passion, so it sort of picked me, if that makes sense. I started doing something I loved, and then I started doing more of it, and then it organically happened that when I left the bank, yes, I wasn't quite ready, but I had been doing it for so long that it wasn't that scary. So when people say to me, "Oh, it was such a brave decision," it wasn't really at all. In fact, had I not done it, it would have been a very odd decision, if that makes sense. So I would just always follow what makes you curious. What do you want to find out more about? If you go to a session and you think, oh, that's fascinating, no matter what it is, it could be in more in
Yeah.
the technical, it could be more in the core skills side of things, and
Yeah.
delve into it, because you never know what's going to happen.
True.
Yeah.
Barsha, I think we have something here that you and I could take back for ourselves as well. With this show, that is something we're exploring to perhaps see
Yeah,
what is in here. You know, maybe there's a thread there to pull on too, but later.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, and it's what you're doing is really great. You know, our audience comprises of, and we try to repeat this over and over again. It's like it's for
Mm.
those that are either early on in their career and they're starting off their journey in sort of a professional setup in one or the other, or whatever the
Mm.
background, the career of their choice, or
Yeah.
it's also directed at those that are making a shift in their career from one domain to another, just like
Mm.
you did. Or maybe they're coming into technology because both of us are from the tech space. We are in sales. So making that journey into the tech space. And
Yeah.
and people get nervous, especially the young professionals. They get nervous. Oh, am I supposed to be the expert in my technology? And will
Mm.
that make me a good sales engineer? Or do I have
Mm.
to be an expert at this domain? But we
Mm.
forget there's a lot of these skills that surround it or competencies that surround it that are
Mm.
transferable they bring to the
Yeah,
table, which should make them confident about making that switch.
absolutely.
And what you said about storytelling is a critical part of it. So tell us a little bit about the kind of people that you help now,
Mm.
and sort of what you get from this journey of public speaking coaching.
Yeah. So there's generally two different types of people that I help. There's the people that is very much the old version of me, that petrified of speaking and really find it difficult. So generally what I do with them, and the art of storytelling is all about confidence. So making them feel more comfortable, more confident to actually share their message, to speak up and things like
Can I
that.
ask, so just quickly to interrupt, you
Yeah.
talked about your old, you know, your old petrified version, and
Yeah.
clearly you're not, you're helping other people. When was there a flick of a switch? Do you remember a time when you were like petrified to, like, today I'm not
Oh,
petrified? Like,
no, no, no. I wish it was that simple. No, it wasn't a flick the switch, but I do remember feeling a definite change, and it was in Toastmasters where I realized that
yep,
I was making traction. And I think that's a
yep,
really important thing, because when you're in that space of feeling like I'm petrified and I find this ghastly and I just want the ground to swallow me up, and you feel a bit helpless, or at least I did. And when I started going through Toastmasters and exploring storytelling on my own and trying to present and getting practice, I realized, actually, as I'm learning these techniques, it's getting easier and I can
mm,
articulate myself. And now I have a structure. I know how to prep, and I can use the art of storytelling, and it's so much more interesting. So yes, I do remember that specific turning point. Was it the only turning point? No, and I've had more of those as I've gone through, but they've been a lot more gradual, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you. I was just curious as you were speaking. So back to your thought
Yeah,
process
okay, no, that's
of
okay. So I was talking about the people that I was helping, and there's the people that are petrified. Then there's another class of people that I help that don't actually mind presenting, and some of them actually quite enjoy presenting, but they're very ambitious and they want to be better. So they either want to get promotions, or they have a recognition that that's going to get them a better personal brand, or it's going to get them a new role, or it's going to help them to be a more effective leader. So it's one of those two different types of people. Now, storytelling is one of those skills that is so universal. It can help you. So I have clients that I coach for nailing an interview, as an example. And of course, storytelling is the most fundamental thing you need to be good at to be able to nail an interview, because there's always the question of tell us a bit about yourself, and then there's the behavioral questions, tell us about a time. Now, if you're not good at telling a story, you're not good at selling yourself, you're probably not as likely to get the interview over someone else who is. Then there's things like sharing information in a workplace setting. So whether you're sharing what you've done, or an idea that you're proposing, or whether you're trying to communicate a strategy, or whether you're trying to communicate and get buy-in for a new tool or a process or something like that, a story is a really effective way to bring people on that journey and help them to understand it in a way that's not hugely technical. So it's a really simple approach that can get people on board and understanding very quickly, and also in a way that you ideally want people to be able to take away that information in their head. It's no point having it in a PowerPoint document. You need them to be able to have it so that when they pass someone if they're at work, or when they're having a conversation with someone on a meeting, that they can say, I know about that. Let me tell you. And they can reel off the story, right? Whereas if it's just information, they're going to have a very hard time of reeling off that story. Or you need that information to make a decision on. How much more effective and efficient is it to have that information in your mind? You just think, oh, yes, okay, well, because of that, I'm going to make this decision, rather than having to find the information in a document somewhere. So that's the power of it. Then there's other aspects in terms of speaking at conferences, as an example. So I've had so many clients that have come to me and said, I am an expert in my field and I'm getting asked to speak at conferences, but I just say no because I don't know, I just don't know how to approach that. I'm nervous, etc. And then once they learn the art of storytelling, they then go and put their name forward for conferences, and then they speak at multiple conferences. And that is the best feeling, to know that it's helped someone to then share their message and their ideas and their knowledge with the world, especially so when it's a female. I mean, I have half male and female clients, but to know that I can get more women on the cybersecurity speaking circuit is obviously something that's very close to me. And then there's the element of personal branding. So if you can share a story when you're on a podcast, you're probably more likely to say yes to podcast gigs, or actually go and hunt them down if you know how to share your story and share the story of the messages you're wanting to explain. Or maybe you're wanting to post more on social media, so you're wanting to build your brand. Being able to understand how to weave stories into the points that you're trying to make is so important. Whether you're a leader and you're wanting to be able to share inspiring messages that people think, wow, that person is really good at explaining things. It's all these things come back to storytelling. Maybe people speaking at their wedding, people speaking at a funeral, because they have a better way to articulate themselves. I mean, it literally has no bounds, because it's always appropriate to tell a story. There's no setting that I would say isn't, unless someone's looking for just the hard facts. But someone had a misconception recently about speaking to the board, and they said, well, I know you can't tell stories to the board, but they are good. And I said, hold on a minute, you can absolutely tell stories to the board. Just because they want information quickly and you have a short time slot doesn't mean you can't get a story out in 60 seconds that's going to capture their attention and help them to understand something better. So there's a place for storytelling everywhere.
And yeah, that's some really good nuggets along the way there, right? And even, we jokingly said, oh, you were asked to go to your school and, because you're a storyteller, tell it to your child's school, right?
Oh,
I
yes,
think it's
yes.
it's actually not too different, is it? Like, if you understand the audience and you're
Yeah.
trying to pass on a message, it's
Yeah.
like it's your story, but it's got to land on, and it could be a 6-year-old or it could be a boardroom, right? But
Yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
heart of it.
And
Yeah.
there's 4 ways I source a story. So this might help people, because what I think people assume is when you're telling kids a story, it might not be, but that you're telling them a made up story, right?
Yeah.
Like you make up something about something that they might relate to. Maybe, I know if it was my daughter, it'd be involving rainbows and unicorns. I know that's so cliche, but that would be something that she would love. So there's
Yeah,
the
that would go for
mythical,
me as well, Emily.
yeah, that was there's the mythical type of stories which you can absolutely use, but I always tell people to start with a personal story if you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have some personal experience with what you're talking about? Generally, people assume that they don't, but if you have an opinion on something, like if you're trying to make a
Yeah.
point, whether it's technical or not, if it's about leadership, if it's about identity and access management, if you believe that, there's a reason why you believe it. You would have experienced things
Mhm.
that led you to believe that. So what that experience is a story. So your personal experience is one. A story that you've heard from someone else can also be a great use. So it might be something you hear firsthand on a podcast. It might be something that you hear from your boss or your colleague or your parents or something like that. The third one is something from the public domain. So you didn't hear it directly, but it's out there for consumption. And then the fourth one is the mythical made up one. Now, the mythical made up one doesn't have to be in La La Land. It could be something that would absolutely happen. And you have to use that option if you're wanting to tell the strategy story, as an example. So if you imagine you've got a new strategy for an organization, a department, or a team, you're wanting to explain what that future would look like. Instead of showing a PowerPoint slide with 4 pillars and explaining it in details of the initiatives you're going to do, what you can do is paint a picture of what that future looks like. Now, it's going to be hopefully a very realistic view of what you're assuming life will be like. And that would start with something like, I want you to imagine, and then you paint the picture of, in 5 years, this is what we'd be doing, etc. So it doesn't have to be mythical and unrealistic. That fourth category is a great option when you feel like, oh, I don't have a personal story because we haven't implemented that strategy yet. So there should always be, within those 4 buckets, something that you can go to explain what you wanted to explain with the story.
Yeah. So if I can summarize that in case if we've missed it. So the first one is start with your personal story, right? Second is if you've had experience around the topic or maybe an idea you've heard of.
So so the first one is you either go with a story of your own, you either go with a story of someone else's, you go from one that you found in the public domain, or you go for a hypothetical. So it's in fact 4 ways to source a story to make one point.
Got it. Yeah.
And you got to have at least one or the other. I mean, we talk about technology all the time. Every one of us have encountered a customer situation, or you don't have to reveal the names, but you can talk about a particular customer situation where you say, imagine that you are the leader in this particular domain, and there are 14,000 other companies that are depending on you to do your business. And then imagine you're down. Then what happens? Like, you're not just impacting, but you're impacting 15,000 others who are in turn servicing 10,000 other customers. Right away, you talk about 150,000 people that are impacted by this. So, and hence, and we could extrapolate that, and that's
I love that. It adds so much credibility. Like, even if it's a made up thing, you're still thinking, people appreciate you putting the effort in, right? Like, you're going, okay, so either I've seen this, I've heard this, or you see this in media, or let's just create a hypothetical sort of scenario. and following up on that, so you've created what it looks like right now. But
Yeah.
then the most delicious part of the whole thing is, imagine, right? Imagine 5 years down the line or 2 months down the line,
Yeah.
here's where you will be, and you like that is amazing, right? If you can, if that's the vision, that's the kind of, I mean, it's to your team, it's to your kid.
Mm.
Like, if the teachers do that all the time in school, right? Like, I want to
Mm.
take you from here to here, and that's the
Yeah.
ultimate goal. If you
Mm.
keep that's very clear. There's no distractions. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Totally, totally.
It's so powerful. And the bit that you really
This
want is that you want people to be able to retain it and be able to reshare it or use it. And you can't, the problem is you just can't do that with the amount of information that we try and throw at people these days.
an interesting thought there, right? Because
Mhm.
I called on Barsha to help with this show, and we both decided to collaborate on this one because she invited me to her series when she was at a previous company, and it was called All About Data, and I said data, Barsha, not data. So
It's
and
American. Now we've spoken about it so much that she's converted.
I'm just converted. I'm just going to say data. So she had this show all about data, and then she asked me to come in, and she knows that I love data
Mm.
a lot. And but I've always and I went through that journey that you just talked about, which is putting a whole bunch of slides. Like, hey, I love data. I'm very data driven. I'm
Yeah.
very much, I'm somebody that like knows my stuff. And here's where I'm
Yeah.
going to put a whole lot of data
Yeah.
in your face, and then I'm going to tell you a story around it. Like, no, that's just not a good way. And over
Mm.
time, I didn't have a coach like you, so I sort of stumbled my way through it and reading a couple of
Yeah.
books and all of that stuff. But sort of came through that journey, and now I think I have a better way of telling the story using imagine, right?
Yeah.
And then, but this is where we are today because my data supports it. This is what the
Yes.
data is telling me we are today. But imagine a place where we'd look more organized or more mature in how we approach this. And it's been good, but not,
Yeah.
I mean, it took me a lot of time to make that journey and get to
Yeah.
where I am. What you're saying is
Yeah.
you can do this. And how long does it take? Like, remember I was just talking about our
Uh-huh.
intended audience are younger and they are making the switch. What would
Yeah.
you tell them as they're going through their own journey of making themselves be heard? Just like, Barsha decided to do this amazing show and just look where she is today, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, we've got Ginny in the background, right? We've got Ginny in the background. Like,
yeah.
yeah, magic. Yeah, cool, cool.
I feel like I mean, it's like saying how long is a piece of string. You can get started straight away and notice difference, I suppose, is the most important thing to say. I don't feel like I've stopped learning and growing. So even after 5 years, there's still things that I need to work on. There's still things that I learn and incorporate all the time. But can you change straight away and get some amazing results? Absolutely. I think the biggest shift that I would get people to do and that has helped me is to think about things in terms of a connection. So I used to talk about something as if it's just happened in isolation, if that makes sense. So I used to manage a risk toolkit, and the risk toolkit would be used by project managers and they would assess the risks before they would go live. Now, I would always just talk to them when I was presenting about the toolkit. Maybe I'd give them a tiny little bit of context at the start, but 95% of my presentation was on the tool and the tabs of the tool. Now, that didn't give context to them and it didn't help them understand, the journey and things like that. So if I was to do that again, I would
Mm-hmm.
spend 30% of my time talking about the context. Why do we have the tool? What is going on that is causing a problem for project managers that they need this security toolkit, if that makes sense? Then I'd spend 30% of time talking about the tool and 30% of time helping them see what life could look like if they use the tool, because you want to give them clarity about what it is, but you really want to motivate them to want to use it. And that comes from connecting the dots. So everything in my mind has 3 parts. So everything has a before and everything has an after. Whether you're talking about a strategy, whether you're talking about yourself in an interview, whether you're talking about a tool, a process, a risk framework, anything has some context of before and some context of after. So if you can literally just make that change when you're going to speak to your boss about help you need, instead of saying, I need this, give them some of the background context. I was trying to do this and then this happened. Therefore, I need this. If you can give me this, I'll be able to execute XYZ faster, right? It's such a simple framework that people can use to start. That is, in essence, using the art of storytelling to connect the dots for people. Does it have all the ingredients? No. If everyone wants to then elevate it, you can make sure you've got characters in it, and you can make sure that you've got time markers. Now, what I mean by characters, if we've got the time to explain it, is you were talking before, Ginny, I think about something about being, in the future you'll be more effective in your story or something like that. What you would want to do to take that story to the next level would be to say, what would people be doing if they're more effective in the new world? So if you can put the character into the end of the story to say, line managers, when they're doing performance reviews, are going to be doing it so much quicker, and they have all that rich data, therefore they're going to be able to assess people more accurately. Okay, that's what more effective or more efficient actually means. So helping people connect the dots from before and after is one thing, but then adding in the people is another thing, and giving them an understanding of time. Is it going to be 5 years in the future, or is it 5 days?
Yeah. Wow, there's quite a lot to unpack. I'm sure we could, double click on each of that for like at least a couple of hours, right?
Absolutely.
Because this is so great. It's a, it's just it's even more than so, because most people look at storytelling and they think you need to have characters. And when you
Mm.
just said that, oh, you can then introduce characters as well. I said, oh, isn't that what storytelling is all about? But no,
Mm.
it's just that it's so simple. You put the before and then the after, and you connect it
Mm.
with people and then time. That's it. It's
Yeah,
very simple.
Yeah.
it
Drawing that
is.
picture.
Yeah.
And I think it's just going back to that stereotype in IT security, any sort of technical role or serious sort of roles, right? It's like it's almost like you need the expectation is you should not be fluffy. Storytelling is fluffy,
Mm.
like, and when you add a little bit of color to something, you don't fit in that square that
Mm.
it's always meant to be. And especially I think women, we already are minority, and then if you start telling stories and if you just start making things simpler, it's
Mm.
almost like, do you not know the difficult things because you're
Yeah.
making it too simple? Like, it's so much I love this conversation because it's normalizing how, as human beings, what is the base for us, really, right?
Yeah.
Like, what drives, what sticks to our
Yeah.
mind. A strong story
What?
of I have a 5-year-old. Like, if I um create a fun story to him about any activity, it sticks. He never
Mm.
forgets it. But if I just tell him to do a task, he will forget it. Like,
Completely. Yeah.
so it's amazing. It's like it's breaking so many stereotypes as well, especially in the context of the conversation we're having. It's like what's normal is what we created as normal. Nothing's
Mm.
normal. Like, we created, and I think we're going back to basics of just being humans. It's so amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
that's what it was. Like, I was about a year ago. I was doing this trip in India, and I met this amazing storyteller, and she was talking to me about this art of storytelling and how we need to revive it, because there's a lot of traditional things and cultural things that just come through this art of storytelling. Because nobody would wrote books and or read midnight stories. They all came through generation after generation, and they all had a lot of values and principles that they just like
Beliefs.
sort of
Yeah.
gave generation to generation, and that's how values were passed on. So those stuck because it
Mm.
was built. A story was built around it, like you said, character and time and people were
Yeah.
built into that, and that's how they retain those values.
Absolutely.
So these cultures that define and retain those values came through storytelling, and
yeah,
we just discount everything as fluff, and then
Yeah.
like, let's stick to
yeah,
hard facts.
yeah.
Can I
Well
give you
said.
I've got a,
a hard fact? I know it's a story wrapped in a fact, but I think this will hopefully settle the argument in terms of people that think, oh no, I need to be factual. So I don't know if anyone knows this about the World Guinness record holders that do the memory champions,
Oh,
but if you ever do any investigation into memory and memory champions, they all use the art of storytelling to help them remember things. And I was delving into this to try and get some research, and I looked at a particular record that exists, and it's the record of remembering the digits of pi. So if you know, pi
oh
is
yeah.
one of those digits that just keeps recurring, 3.142
Yeah.
something something. Now, this person in China a while ago wanted to break the current world record, and so he started memorizing the digits. And he memorized an outstanding number of about over 10,000 of the digits in its correct order. Now, mind you, this took him, I think, about 24 hours to say, right?
Wow.
So it's an incredible amount of numbers. And how they do it is they take the digits and they pretend that they're characters, humans or animals, and they have them interacting in a memory palace. And that is the only
Wow.
way they can remember these random digits in their correct order. So if you think storytelling is just fluffy and it's all about being emotional, it is not. It is the best way to hack into how the mind works and make people remember things.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people watching this, especially IT, and now they would be motivated, right? Because
Yeah,
it's factual. I mean, it's not a story, but it's factual. It's, we're talking about World Guinness record. So
yeah.
It works.
I can't argue with that.
yeah, yeah. Hey,
That's
I've got one question, and I don't know if we would be able to explore that, but I was keen. We talk about storytelling, creating, and being comfortable.
Mm.
It's fine. But then, have you come across times where you may have to create a different story or navigate through a different explanation of a situation just so that it becomes a bit more powerful context? Have you had to go
Oh,
through
yeah,
that? Right?
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
what happened is happened, and it could impact positively or negatively for your experience and confidence moving forward. So it's keen to hear maybe an example of like how easy or how feasible or whatever it is to
Mm.
maybe change the narrative so you come out of it so it helps you.
Do you mean if you're in a situation and you've explained something to someone and they haven't quite got it and you've had to pivot? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or that, or you've gone through a really negative experience, but you want to be powerfully ex- um, tapping into that experience, but not as a victim, but as a
Oh.
taking something out of that, so it becomes a powerful context when you're
Oh,
creating that.
so you mean it's the internal story that you're telling yourself? Is that what
Yes,
you're saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you come across that?
I don't deal a lot with the internal
Yeah,
storytelling side of things, but I do a lot of work with people on their mindset. And the way
yeah.
that we show up now is a factor of what we've experienced in the past, right?
Mm,
And I mean, this
mm,
is all came so clear to me when a very random story, but I had a staffy and he fell in the pool when he was a puppy a couple of
mm.
times because we had a pool at home. And then ever since then, he was completely terrified of water, wouldn't
Yeah,
get in, everything like that. And I mean, that for me is such a great example of he's only afraid of the water because of what happened. And if you look at a lot of us, if we have a bad experience with presenting, that will make us even more nervous again, or we speak to executives and then that becomes the thing that we don't like, right? So you have to then change the narrative in your mind, because if you're going to continue on with that script of I'm not good
mm,
at performing in those situations, or water is dangerous, as an example for my dog, then you're always going to get that outcome. So it
yeah,
is really important to recognize, and I call them limiting beliefs. What is that
yes,
limiting belief that you're telling yourself? You might be aware of it and you might not be aware of it. So spend some time thinking about what that actually is. Then write
yeah.
down, what I get people to do is write down 10 reasons why that's not actually correct, because
Wow.
in a lot of cases it's not a fact, it's just something that you've made up in your mind. And so if you debunk it 10 times, then come up with one new belief. Because just like a song that we will get caught in our mind, right? Like if you think of any catchy song, it's generally a short lyric that you get caught in your head, or a short
Yeah.
couple of lyrics. You want to condense those 10 reframes into something more positive so that you have something catchy. So yes, you can definitely change the story that you tell yourself so that it does become more
Yeah.
productive.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? Because I think if somebody is going through, if they want to do public speaking, or do nail their presentation, and they're
Mm,
going, no, I tried and I've failed, or I
mm,
tried 10 years ago and since then I haven't had confidence. It's amazing, like you've actually given a very actionable next step, right? Think
mm,
about what is it that you're scared about, what happened, and
mm.
write 10 things that you're thinking is real but it's not. And
Yeah,
I think that's already a way ahead of overcoming that, which is
absolutely.
such a actually it's amazing. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and I've never had any client that hasn't been able to debunk them. So
Mm.
you think that that's true and you're literally living your life as if it's true, but when you unpack it and you get it out on paper, it actually almost automatically loses some of its value, because you look at it and you think, is that
Yes.
really is that really what's stopping me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, we were talking. I don't know who it was I was talking to about this concept of logically thinking through something, and it actually breaks down this perceived notion of something terrifying happening, or like people start to count, or somebody's going into an anxiety or a panic
mm,
moment, and then they start asking them like really basic question, like, "Hey, what did you have for breakfast this morning?" And you go like, "What?" Like, why would you ask somebody something like that? And they go like, no, if you ask them to think about something rational, because they're already lost in this moment, they
yes,
actually are able to bring them down. It demystifies that thing, that cloud that is enveloping them with its fear or
yeah.
uncertainty or some sort of an anxiety. And so I've heard
Mm,
that often, but I did not realize that it could also work in similar situations. This has
yeah.
been really, really awesome conversation. It's like really good. Like
Oh,
Barsha said, we could just keep going and talking about
yeah.
it. I'm sure that your clients and folks that come to you have actually do benefit a lot from something like we benefited so much in the 40
Oh,
minutes. I've taken so many notes that I'd love to try myself as well.
mm,
But we always ask this of our guests in Barsha, like
mm,
join pipe in if I'm missing something. But we always ask, what is it that we want some of our audience to take back? You said something about storytelling, and those are all very good ones, but something to
mm,
take back for them to say, if you want to start today and
yeah.
address this concept of building your career that may involve,
Mm,
well, may not even involve public speaking, but it helps you build confidence in your narrative. What
mm,
would you tell them? What would be some of the key takeaways for them? Where should they start, and how
yeah.
should they approach this?
Yeah, well, one, I would say start doing some learning, and that can take many forms. So, if it's about storytelling, even doing things like being aware when you're watching things, when you're watching documentaries, when you're listening to a podcast, when are people sharing stories versus not sharing stories, and what are they doing? I spent so many years analyzing instances of stories and instances where I thought a story could have been used before I did any telling of stories myself. So it's a really
Mm.
safe place of observation. And I also then just started delving into the art of storytelling. So whether it was watching TED Talks, whether it was going and booking into storytelling workshops, or anything of the above, or going to Toastmasters, something where you're actually learning is fantastic. Then you need to start doing, obviously. And I mean, doing could be starting to try and string things together into a connected three dots, if that makes sense, of the before, now, and after. Or maybe you'll be starting to share your personal story more with people. It doesn't matter, but just start. If you can start, you can get better. If you don't start, you obviously can't get any better. And then if you can review what you have done, that's another fantastic step. So if you've written a story, review it and see if you can improve it. If you've shared a story in a session, if you can get it recorded and rewatch it, that is the best way that people can start. All of those things, they can be free things, if that makes sense, and it doesn't
Mhm.
require any any dependencies for them to start on those aspects.
That is
Wow.
amazing. Thank you, Emily. You run a business on the art of storytelling. You've got lots of clients and customers. So we really, really, really appreciate you spilling some beans with
Oh,
us
no
right
worries.
now. Because,
No problem.
yeah, but appreciate the time. Such a short notice. It's been fantastic. Like Maha said, there's so many things. I'm making notes as well as I go because there's so many things that I have taken away, and I hope our audience, finds it as much helpful. And that's the whole point, right? Like bringing the shared collectible knowledge, and passing it on for whoever it is relevant to, right? Like we can't. It's not intended for the 7 billion people, but
Yeah.
whoever it's relatable to, and maybe it creates a bit of a memory and maybe a little bit of persuasion as well, right? I think
Yes.
that's pretty good. Appreciate that. Thank you.
No
And thank you,
worries.
Maha. Always appreciate this.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much,
ladies.
Emily.